When the icy northern wind brushes against my face, I can still feel the presence of those days. Days when winter and death were my only companions, and every breath was a wager against fate. My name is Simo Häyhä, but the men who feared crossing my path called me the White Death. Stay until the end to discover my incredible story. I was born on December 17th, 1905, in Rautjärvi, a small village near the Russian border. It was a place where nature spoke in whispers and winter ruled without mercy. There, I learned the art of listening to silence, of walking without leaving a trace, and of feeling the heartbeat of the forest as if it were my own. In my youth, my rifle was my tool, not a weapon. It was an extension of my arm when I hunted to feed my family. I never imagined that one day I would use it to defend more than a home, to protect a nation. When the Winter War broke out in 1939, the quiet days on the farm became distant memories. The Soviet Union, a giant in numbers and resources, demanded what did not belong to it. And we, a small people, armed with courage and an understanding of the cold, rose up to resist. I was not a soldier at first, but war does not wait for you to be ready. At the front, winter was not an enemy. It was our most faithful ally. Temperatures dropped below 40 degrees Celsius and snow covered the landscape like a white shroud. For others, it was a punishment. For me, it was a refuge. Dressed in white, I moved between the trees like a shadow. My steps were light, my shots precise. In war, every bullet carries weight, and I made sure mine was never wasted. My weapon was a modified Mosin Nagant, simple but lethal. Unlike many others, I did not use a telescopic sight. I knew the sun could betray me, glinting off the glass, and I preferred to trust my own eyes and my training. Every time I pulled the trigger, the world seemed to stop. The echo of the shot dissolved into the vastness, and I merged back into the landscape. I was no hero, nor did I seek to be one. I was just a man doing what had to be done. The snow was my companion and my ally. Before every mission, I prepared my position with care. I packed the snow beneath my body so it wouldn't give away my presence by shifting, and I placed snow in my mouth to prevent the vapor of my breath from revealing my location. I knew the enemy was always searching for signs, a glint, a sound, a movement. But I gave them nothing. I began my days before dawn. The sky was still stained black, and the stars shone like holes torn through the fabric of the night. I prepared my equipment meticulously. Every bullet was clean, every part of my rifle inspected. I knew a single mistake could cost me my life. Before setting out, I took a moment to listen to the forest's silence, to synchronize my breathing with the heartbeat of the world. The routes I took were never the same. I knew every tree, every rock, every possible hiding place in the forest. Familiarity with the terrain was my advantage. As I moved forward, I watched the tracks in the snow, subtle signs that the enemy might be near. Sometimes I found animal trails, and for a brief moment, I remembered the days when hunting was only for food. One of the strategies I used was to create multiple firing positions. I built small trenches in the snow, reinforced with ice for added stability. This allowed me to move between them without being detected, confusing the enemy about my true location. I even placed decoys, such as branches made to resemble rifles, to distract Soviet observers. Sound was both my ally and my enemy. In the stillness of winter, the crack of a branch could give you away. I learned to move with an almost supernatural lightness. Every step was calculated, avoiding areas where the snow might give way too deeply. Even my breathing was controlled, slow and measured, so as not to disturb the natural rhythm of the surroundings. I remember one night in particular, when the aurora borealis painted the sky with dancing colors. I took advantage of the distraction offered by that natural spectacle. I knew the soldiers, mesmerized by the lights, would let their guard down. I positioned myself on higher ground from where I could see the enemy camp. I watched as they gathered, some pointing at the sky, others laughing and telling stories. In that moment, the war felt distant, and for an instant, I hesitated to pull the trigger. But I remembered why I was there. I fired, and the echo rang out like thunder in the stillness of the night. There were days when the weather was so unforgiving that even moving was an ordeal. Blizzards could disorient even the most experienced. But I had learned to read the signals of the wind, to use the storms to my advantage. I knew the enemy would take shelter, trusting that no one would dare to attack under such conditions. Yet those were the moments when I became most daring. Snow and wind silenced my movements, erased my tracks, and allowed me to get closer than usual. On one occasion, I infiltrated so close to the Soviet camp that I could hear their conversations. They spoke of me, of the White Death, with fear and superstition. Some said I was a demon, others that I was the embodiment of winter itself. I smiled to myself, knowing that fear was a powerful weapon. I was not only facing ordinary soldiers. The Soviets had sent their best snipers to hunt me down. It was a dangerous game, a duel of skill and patience. Once, I felt someone watching me. I remained completely still for hours until I noticed a faint glint among the trees. It was the lens of a telescopic sight. Calmly, I took aim and fired. The enemy fell, never knowing where the shot came from. The war also taught me about camaraderie. Although I operated alone, I knew I was not truly isolated. Other Finnish soldiers relied on me, and I relied on them. We shared information and supported each other however we could. There was an unspoken trust, a brotherhood forged in ice and blood. Once, I learned of a massive enemy advance. They were preparing to attack a key position. I could not allow it. For days, I harassed them, eliminating their officers and sabotaging their supplies. I used traps and stratagems to slow them down. Even on a dark night, I infiltrated their camp and freed some of our prisoners. It was risky, but necessary. The extreme conditions also took a toll on both body and mind. There were nights when the cold seeped into my bones, and hunger was a constant companion. But my determination was stronger. I remembered my mother's words. Winter can be harsh, but it is also fair to those who respect it. And I respected winter like an old friend. The animals of the forest were also a signal. When the birds stopped singing, I knew something was wrong. Wolves howled in the distance, and deer fled in fear. I learned to read those signs, to understand that we were not the only ones affected by the war. At times, I shared my rations with a lost creature, reminding myself that life continued beyond the conflict. One day, while I was in one of my positions, I saw a young Soviet soldier who seemed lost. He was barely more than a boy, probably forced to fight. I could have eliminated him easily, but something stopped me. I watched as he searched desperately for his comrades. Eventually, he decided to retreat. In that moment, I understood that the war was bigger than all of us and that sometimes mercy could be just as powerful as a bullet. The notoriety I gained also brought challenges. The Soviet High Command became obsessed with eliminating me. They offered rewards. They sent special units. They even shelled entire areas with heavy artillery just on the suspicion that I might be there. But every failed attempt only strengthened my resolve. Survival was not only physical but mental as well. I had to keep my mind clear to avoid slipping into despair. I found comfort in small rituals, sharpening my knife, cleaning my rifle, writing brief notes in a notebook I carried with me. Those activities reminded me of who I was and why I was fighting. One of the greatest tests came when I faced an elite Soviet sniper known for his precision and cunning. For days, we played a game of cat and mouse, each trying to locate the other without being discovered. In the end, I noticed a slight anomaly in the snow, a shadow that didn't belong. I aimed and fired. When I approached, I saw that I had taken down one of the best. I felt no joy, only a resigned calm. The war pressed on, and although we managed to hold our ground, the losses were significant. Each day, more comrades fell, and the weight of responsibility grew heavier. But I never lost hope. I knew that every action I took could make a difference, that my skill was a tool in the service of my country. Winter began to give way, and with it, the intensity of the fighting. Negotiations were underway, and eventually, peace was signed. We had endured against all odds. My work at the front was over, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would remain. On March 6, 1940, fate decided to test me. I had been at the front all day, facing an enemy trying to advance. Then I felt it, the impact, the sudden heat across my face. An enemy bullet had struck my jaw. I fell, and the snow that had so often protected me was now stained red. Darkness closed in around me, and for a moment, I thought that would be my end. I woke up days later, disfigured but alive. The war ended shortly after, and Finland had endured. I never returned to the front. My face was a living scar of what had happened. I went back home to the forest that had taught me so much. I lived a quiet life, far from the noise of cities and the conversations of war. People sought me out. They wanted to speak with me, to understand how an ordinary man had achieved so much. But I never saw myself as a hero. I was only a son of Finland, someone who defended his land with the tools life had given him. Sometimes, when the full moon lights up the forest, I feel that those days are not so far away. I hear the echo of the gunshots, the crunch of snow beneath my boots, the silence that came before danger. War did not define me, but it taught me that even under the most extreme conditions, willpower can prevail. Did you know that I never wore gloves on the front line because I wanted to feel every part of my rifle as if it were an extension of myself? Or that, to avoid being detected, it could take me 30 minutes just to bring a sugar cube to my mouth. Those details, seemingly small, made the difference between life and death. Today, history remembers me as the deadliest sniper in history, with 505 confirmed kills. But I prefer to be remembered as a man who loved his land and who never allowed the cold, not even the cold of death, to freeze him completely.